Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel for another video on the next Mass Effect game. So for the upcoming instalment in the Mass Effect series, in my opinion at least, BioWare will need to revolutionise the Mass Effect experience by introducing something new and never before seen in the series. Space combat in Mass Effect. Let that sink in a second. Yes, space combat. What if the next game had space exploration and combat? What if we actually took the reins of interstellar warfare by navigating the vast reaches of space in a battle for survival and dominance? So again, this also depends on if we're going to have the Milky Way galaxy or Andromeda or both, because I think having both galaxies will probably be the way to please both fan bases the most. But what if we actually took part in these massive space battles we see in the cutscenes? Because obviously for years at least, I don't know if this is just me, but when I see these massive space battles in Mass Effect, I always wish that we could take part in them. So let's talk about how BioWare could pull this off and what they'll need for space combat to be a success. So first off, BioWare are going to need to seamlessly integrate exploration and space combat together. So Mass Effect 5 will need to seamlessly integrate space combat into the exploration aspect of the game. They'll need to have transition between planetary surfaces, and space will need to happen seamlessly. Now, I'm not talking anything as mental as No Man's Sky and Starfield where you can actually go straight into a planet. Maybe it's something like Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, where you're in space and you fly up to a planet and then there's like a load screen and then you're taken to the planet. I think that modern day consoles loading screens are fast enough. A recent example of this is Spider-Man 2, where it's literally like 2 or 3 seconds for load screens and fast travels, so I don't think load screens will be an issue here. So don't expect any Bethesda load screens here where you're there for half an hour. I think they'll need to allow players to engage in intense dogfights above planets, explore hidden asteroid bases, and defend key strategic points in the galaxy. Space combat and exploration could maybe even be used to mine for materials and minerals, so we don't have to spend hundreds of hours launching probes.
Really, Commander? Probing Uranus.
Next up is us being able to customise our spaceships. The heart of space combat lies in the ships you actually command, because in my opinion the Normandy and the Tempest aren't just a ship, they're basically an extension of the crew. They're another character in of themselves. Can you imagine Mass Effect without the Normandy or without the Tempest? You can't, that's how iconic they are. But Mass Effect 5 will need to introduce a highly customisable spaceship system where players can upgrade and modify their vessels with various weapons, defensive systems and advanced technology. Whether you prefer speed and agility or heavy firepower, your ship becomes an extension of your own playstyle and gameplay. So what if in the next Mass Effect game we have some kind of vendor on some of the planets, or the Citadel, or sort of the Ark, so depends on where the game's set in the next installment. But what if we actually get to customize the weapons, the defenses, the shields, the FTL system, the drive, the engines, and maybe the actual customization aspect of it could also reach to sticker decals, so maybe like slapping an N7 logo on your ship, or maybe decals of like chibi versions of the characters. Maybe you can give it trims, you can have like a matte finish, metallic finish, and you can customize it to that extent. I was really inspired by this point when playing Mass Effect 2, because in Mass Effect 2, in order to get the best ending where your entire squad survives the Collector's attack and then the suicide mission, you will need to upgrade and customise the Normandy. So basically you need to customise and upgrade the cannons, the drive, the shields, everything. So what if this extends to the actual ship, which then goes into space combat and gameplay? It goes that step further, where, think about as well, in Mass Effect Andromeda you can fully customise the Nomad. Think of that, but with your actual ship, whether it be the actual main ship, so whatever this SFX ship that we've seen in the N7 Day poster, or if they bring back the Normandy, maybe we can customise the Normandy, who knows. But again, we'll have to wait and see how BioWare do this, but I think customisation will need to be a big thing if space combat and exploration is indeed coming. Next up, the game and the actual play space will need to have dynamic environments. Say goodbye to static backgrounds. I hate games where there's just nothing there and you're just flying two different systems with maybe the next game could have maybe Cerberus vessels or Remnant or Angara, or maybe a new faction or tribe that's flying around in space that you can seamlessly integrate into combat with. Maybe each star system should boast dynamically changing environments. Maybe it could include turbulent asteroid fields to electrifying nebulae where you're going through maybe like a storm, to maybe even the Scourge from Mass Effect Andromeda, or dark energy, because we do know dark energy will play some kind of role in the story or the lore in the next Mass Effect game, so maybe flying through it will be difficult and maybe it might batter around your shields and you'll need to navigate it a bit more, hence why I mentioned customization earlier. I think bioware should let us adapt our tactics to the ever-shifting conditions in space. Now, I'm not talking about procedural generation because that's going to be too hard on development, and bioware already have enough on their hands without adding that in. So maybe we can use the environment to gain a strategic advantage over our foes in the next game. Next up are fleet battles. So think the original, I think it was the original Battlefront and Battlefront 2, which had these massive space battles where you could go to like a capital ship and then fly in and out into individual skirmishes and dogfights. But Mass Effect 5 will need to elevate space combat with these epic fleet battles. What if we command a fleet of allied ships, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, to coordinate attacks, defend against enemy offences, and witness the chaos of large-scale warfare as entire armadas clash in the cosmos of space? And this really perfectly leads me on to my next point: tactical decision making. So Mass Effect is known for having Paragon, Renegade and difficult choices to make in general. So what if this was applied to space combat? Space combat in the next Mass Effect game will need to introduce a layer of tactical decision making. Maybe we have to, before we actually go into a battle, a big fleet battle, I'm talking about here, where we have to assess the battlefield, prioritise targets and decide who goes where and whether to engage in direct confrontations or employ hit and run guerrilla warfare tactics where you don't really care and you just go in. I was really inspired by this decision in Mass Effect 3. In Mass Effect 3 you have war assets on the galaxy map and the actual war table where you basically gain assets throughout the story. But then what if this applied to space combat? So maybe in the story you talk to a general or someone higher than Commander Shepard or whoever we're playing as in the next game, maybe the new N7 operative, and maybe we have to talk to them about setting up the battlefield before we go into it. This could be, I guess, like UI and gameplay wise, this could be similar to a chessboard or a game like Fire Emblem, for example, where you have to essentially place your pieces before you go into battle. So what if this applied to ships as well as the story? Again, Mass Effect is known for making our individual player choices, and I think these choices will impact the course of the battle and the fate of the galaxy. Maybe this would even impact these battles, these big fleet battles, the fate of an entire system or a planet. Maybe if done incorrectly, or maybe choosing a renegade option, you could destroy an entire planet, which would have, I guess, implications and ramifications for later on in the game and if they decide to do another trilogy. But what if going into the next game, say, I'm going to use this as an example, so maybe in the next Mass Effect game we're setting up for a big fleet battle and we have a Turian side character that we're talking who has his own squad. He's a pilot and he's a starfighter, and then all of his squad are in this, they're in a squad basically, and he says to you before the battle, just be careful, but yeah, we're ready to do whatever your choice is, Commander Shepard. And then before the battle you place them in an order somehow and they get absolutely obliterated. Maybe because of your decision making it impacts who lives and who dies, and because of this maybe it could even go even further, because we know in the original trilogy these decisions, where these are like small seemingly meaningless decisions, impact the game later on in sometimes big ways. So what if in the next game, because say for example you send this squad of Turians out and the entire squad par one member dies. So maybe this character who lives grows to then resent your character because of your failure to make a good decision in this fleet battle, and maybe that can then impact the story because maybe they're needed for a side quest or a story mission and they actually go against you in the story. I think that'd be really cool. So next up we're talking about multiplayer galactic warfare. So I don't think that multiplayer is going to be in the next Mass Effect game in any way, shape or form, other than maybe like social, maybe having like a photo mode, but that's beside the point. I don't think a multiplayer mode will return. But in terms of the next Mass Effect game, and if you're going to have space battles, I think it would be really stupid not to include some kind of multiplayer competitive space battles. Maybe it has its own battle pass and ranking system, but again, I don't really want to venture too much into the world of microtransactions, as I think that's not really what Mass Effect is or should be. But what if we had essentially allowed you to join forces with or face off against players online in multiplayer space battles? Maybe we could even form clans, alliances, and again, maybe before you go into the battle you can pick who goes away if you have like a squad leader, for example. But again, I don't think multiplayer is going to appear, but if it does, I think that adding another social dimension to the next Mass Effect game could be big. And I think that when I'm thinking about gameplay as well as multiplayer, I am thinking something like Star Wars Battlefront 2, the new version that is. Maybe you could have different modes, for example, like Capture the Flag, or like a variation of it, but more for space battles. Maybe like King of the Hill, Team Deathmatch. Maybe you could have like a Last Man Standing sort of mode. I think these modes, if they are doing space battles, would be something for BioWare to seriously consider. But if done incorrectly, could actually harshen the next game. Because at the end of the day, I think this is something that has impacted Mass Effect going forward. I do not want multiplayer to take away from the single player experience. The single player experience in terms of story, characters and cinematics, and gameplay in terms of being a good third person shooter is what should come first. And lastly, I'm going to talk about the integration with the narrative and the gameplay. With the Mass Effect series, the narrative remains at the core, and it should do because that's what Mass Effect and BioWare are known for, and space combat should seamlessly weave into the storyline. We should be able to engage in pivotal battles that determine the fate of our star systems, encounter iconic characters from the series, maybe some fan favourites being pilots maybe, and witness the unfolding drama as the galaxy, either the Milky Way, Andromeda or both, teeter on the brink of chaos. Now, one really cool idea that I had in terms of gameplay and how space combat could work would be a combination of Star Wars Battlefront and Ratchet & Clank: A Crack in Time. Now, I don't want it to be as simplistic as Ratchet & Clank because I think in that game space combat is very simplistic, as you can't really go up and down. It is literally just moving around. But I think if they included little things like different weapons, being able to switch to maybe missiles, static lasers, or like semi-automatic or fully automatic weapons, maybe choosing when to engage with a shield, or maybe being able to change your engines to go faster or slower. But another thing that I really would like to see is a radio system, so being able to either communicate with your allies on your squad, or just a general radio where you may be able to play classical music, jazz, heavy metal, maybe even the soundtrack from other BioWare games, maybe Dragon Age music, or maybe even other Mass Effect music like maybe the Afterlife theme or Rannoch from Mass Effect 3 or Cora's Den from the original Mass Effect. I think these would also add into the customization element and something that maybe you have to purchase from a vendor in game to unlock, but I think that'd be awesome. So anyway, everyone, tell me what you think in the comments below. Do you think that space combat is coming with the next Mass Effect game? And if it does, what would you like to see in terms of groundbreaking mechanics? Because in my opinion, BioWare with the next Mass Effect game, it needs to be done right. And I think that adding space combat could be that extra level to really heighten the game, to get casual viewers as well as hardcore Mass Effect fans that have maybe fallen out of love with the series. It could pull them back in. And if space combat is done right, it could be used to maybe mine for minerals and materials. It maybe could be used for, you know, playing music on, customization, and maybe, like I said, it could impact the story. But again, tell me in the comments below, what do you think about all this? Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and for more Mass Effect content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video and share it with your fellow BioWare fans, and tell me in the comments of your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.